streaming, but whatever better proper correct term. All right. Welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular city council meeting for October. We're in October. Cannot believe it. October 5th, 2021. Would everyone please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, council. Thank you, community staff. Roll call, Sylvia.
Mayor Mays.
Here.
Council President Rosner.
Here.
Councilor Garland.
Here.
Councilor Browse, I understand, is absent. Councilor Young.
Here.
Councilor Griffin.
Here.
And Councilor Scott.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. We have next on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
I make motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Kim and Russell. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Thank you, council. We have only two items on the consent agenda. I don't know the last time we've only had two items on the consent agenda. So this is nice. Item A is approval of the September 21st, 2021 City Council meeting minutes. And item B is resolution 2021-089, authorizing city manager or city manager pro tem to sign a professional services contract with KPFF Consulting Engineers for the design of Highway 99 pedestrian overcrossing. How awesome is that to say?
I will make a motion to approve that consent.
Second.
Tim, and is Tim, was that a hand to raise because you're seconding it?
That was a second, yes. Two.
Doing a second discussion on the motion?
Other than I'm really excited about this project kicking off. Super exciting.
Hear, hear. Hearing no additional discussion on the motion, all in favor of approving the two items on the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Citizen comments. Now's the time to address council on any topic. That is not a public hearing in a meeting, and we have two, I believe, comments that have been submitted. Correct, Sylvia?
Correct.
Awesome.
This evening we have comments that submitted from Neil Shannon. Neil Shannon writes, this evening, I'm a resident of Sherwood and I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the issues of parks in the Brookman Road Concept Plan area. Recently, the city of Sherwood adopted the 2021 Parks Master Plan. Included in that plan was the goal of 3 conceptual neighborhood park locations totaling 8.3 acres are planned, along with natural areas near Cedar Creek and Goose Creek. It was also noted that the locations were purposely chosen to ensure all residents would be within a 3-block walk of their local neighborhood park. It was also suggested that at least one of these parks should be incorporating trails into the natural area with trailheads and wayfindings. To date, the city has annexed a total of 84.5 acres and approved construction of 64 acres. However, no provisions for city parks has been considered. It's important to note that all the annexed property is located at the western end of the concept plan area and surrounds the Cedar Creek and Goose Creek wetlands. Development along the west side of Cedar Creek has also been approved and is under construction, and most of the east side of Cedar Creek, annexed into the city in 2017, is in the process of subdivision. An area currently under threat is a 50-foot corridor extending from Redfern Drive to Brookman Road. The development proposes 42 new lots, and the developer is willing to clear, cut, and bulldoze this strand of trees for the sake of 3 lots, squeezed into an area that is questionable in the first place. This corridor, containing more than 50 majestic ancient fir and cedar trees, would make a wonderful addition to Sherwood's parks and trail system. While I understand the City Council does not have decision-making authority over the proposed subdivision, you can share your concerns with the Planning Commission and staff and suggest that this area, as stated in the Code of Ordinance, Division 3, 16.142.070.d.4.e, tree retention, quote, otherwise merit retention because of unusual size of the tree's stand, historic association, or species type, habitat, or wildlife preservation considerations, or some combination thereof, as determined by the city, unquote. Failure to act soon will be a lost opportunity for the city to preserve some of the last of Sherwood's old growth, some of the trees almost 200 years old and predating the Oregon Trail, the Civil War, and even statehood. Signed, Neil Shannon. The other comments this evening were received from Dave Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney writes, Dear Mayor and City Council members, I'm writing you with the citizen comments concerning the Brookman Road addition to and Cedar Creek Garden development. I'm a 20-year resident, Sherwood resident, residing in the Arbor Lane subdivision. My neighbors and I are very concerned with the potential loss of some 70 to 80 giant Douglas fir and cedar trees and a very narrow strip of land that directly connects to the south side of the Arbor Lane subdivision, immediately behind the homes on Shady Grove Drive, from Brookman Road to Red Fern. The developer wants to build 3 houses on that ground, but to do so, because the strip is so narrow, 50 feet, would necessitate destroying all of those giant trees, most of which are well over 100 feet tall, and most of which are over 100 years old. In fact, many of those trees are over 160 years old, which means they predate the Civil War. Some of them, in fact, are older than both the establishment of Sherwood, 1853, and the establishment of the Oregon Trail, 1843. It is extremely important to me and my neighbors that you do everything in your power to preserve and protect this beautiful piece of Sherwood's history and legacy. This could include sharing our concerns with the Planning Commission and staff and suggest that this area be preserved as a natural park area. In short, I would like to put this on your radar as possibly the next stand of old growth trees in Sherwood and elicit your help in saving it. What a shame it would be to lose it. The neighbors and I are trying to find ways to save that strip of land from development and preserve it as a natural area that could be enjoyed by all of us. With all those giant, majestic old growth trees, it's simply a wonderful, serene, and beautiful area well worth preserving. Indeed, it is part of Sherwood's natural legacy. It would be a tragedy to see all that beautiful and history destroyed for the sake of just 3 houses. It is my understanding that the Brookman Road development is mandated to include a number of parks. So far, I'm not aware of any area that has been designated for parks within the Brookman Cedar Creek Garden area. It occurs to a number of us that the narrow strip from Brookman Road to Red Fern, as well as some of the unannexed land immediately south of it, would make a wonderful natural park area. With so little green space still available in Sherwood, it is my profound hope that we can preserve and protect as much of that beautiful and historic ground as we possibly can. We owe it to ourselves, our children, and to generations to come. Thank you very much for listening and for your thoughtful consideration, Dave Sweeney. Mayor, those are the only comments I have.
Thanks, Sylvia. And I know that came up with the Parks Board last night, and staff and Parks Board's talking about it. Next on our agenda is presentations. We have 3 presentations this evening. The first is recognition of Eagle Scout Award recipients. We're excited to recognize outstanding youth in our community, and one of those types of times to highlight is when a young person does well in scouting. And in the Boy Scouts, the ultimate rank is Eagle Scout they can achieve, and 2 young men in Sherwood just recently did achieve the rank of Eagle Scout and want to put some attention on them. One is Matthew Doyle, and the other is Jacob Goulding. So we certainly want to congratulate them, and I'll read the certificates that we're going to give them. We invited them both or to submit details of what they did for their Eagle Scout project. Part of becoming an Eagle Scout, they do a significant project that is something that they get to plan out as a benefit for the community, usually involves lots of hours, not just themselves, but other volunteers that they recruit, maybe other scouts, maybe just other people, and might have to raise money or get donations. So I'm not sure what Matthew Doyle did, but Jacob Goulding submitted a description that Sylvia has that she's going to read to let us know what he did.
So, Mayor and Council, for Jacob Goulding's project, it reads, I organized the construction of 8 new performance boxes for the Sherwood High School cheerleaders to use at football games. I learned about this from my Scoutmaster, whose daughter used to be in the program. The materials for the projects were acquired thanks to the collaboration of Lowe's, Home Depot, Sherwin-Williams, and Clark Lumber. Construction and painting was achieved in 3 weekends with the help of the boys in my Scout troop and family and friends. Avery Roos painted the letters and design on the faces of the boxes. The performance boxes can be seen in use at Sherwood High School football games. Thanks, Jake Goulding.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great project. It was even in the Gazette. So that was nice to see. And they will be used a lot. That's awesome. So we have prepared, and we will be sending certificates of achievement to each. So this certificate of achievement is presented to Matthew C. Doyle on behalf of the City Council and the Sherwood City Council. We congratulate you on your outstanding achievement of attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. Similarly, a certificate of achievement is presented to Jacob K. Goulding. On behalf of the City of Sherwood and the Sherwood City Council, we congratulate you on your outstanding achievement of attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. Great job. We're proud of you. Your parents, I am certain, are proud of you, as well as your friends and extended family. Next in presentations, we have a proclamation declaring October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Chief or Ty, we have a guest that you want to introduce?
Yep, I'm jumping on, Mayor. Sorry.
Great, Ty. Go ahead.
Hang on here. Oops, sorry. Thanks, Mayor and City Council. As you're aware of, you just announced that this month's the Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And with us tonight, we have the Executive Director of the Family Justice Center, Washington County, and it's Rachel, and I may butcher the name, I'm sorry, is it Schutz or Schutz? But she wanted to take a moment and just, Schutz, thank you, and just address the council. So I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you so much, Ty. And thank you, Mayor and City Council, for having me here tonight to speak a little bit about the importance of Domestic Violence Month. And I do thank you so much for declaring October Domestic Violence Month in the City of Sherwood. If you do not know, the Family Justice Center is a collaborative organization in Washington County, serving all of Washington County residents, that seeks to end family violence in our county. What we know about family violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking, and child abuse, which all encompasses family violence, is that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men nationally will experience violence in their home at some point in their life. And also 2 out of 3 children will experience childhood trauma as they are growing up, domestic violence and abuse, to name a few. But the thing that's really tough is that in Washington County, though we have rates that are higher than the national average in both of those accounts, we have more women and more men that experience domestic violence, and we have more children that experience childhood trauma inside of their homes. And so in 2018, the Family Justice Center was founded in order to co-locate all of the organizations in our county that were seeking to end family violence. So we are located with our law enforcement partners, our DA, our courts, as well as our nonprofit providers, such as the Domestic Violence Resource Center, Sexual Assault Resource Center, Safety Compass, Community Action, and more, all working together so that when any survivor comes into the Family Justice Center, they are able to get all of their needs met all at the same time, where the providers are doing the work to talk to one another to ensure that services are coordinated. Because we also know that escaping violence can be extremely challenging. In fact, women who are in domestic violence relationships take between 7 and 10 tries before they actually are able to leave that relationship. And it's because there are so many barriers and there is so much danger to doing so. And so rather than having survivors go door to door in our community to try to navigate the services themselves, or call phone numbers or be given business cards or talk to various different people, we wanted to have a single place for them to come so that all of the services were provided to them when they were able to safely leave and arrive at our door. So declaring October Domestic Violence Awareness Month unites you as the city of Sherwood with us in Washington County in standing up and saying, we are not going to allow violence in our communities anymore. We're going to say no more to abuse. And we're going to say there should not be over 60% of our children experiencing trauma. And there should not be over 30% of our women experiencing domestic violence. We're going to work together as a community to ensure that this stops and that everyone in our community can find the safety that they need to find hope once again. And so I thank you guys so much for joining us and coming together. In fact, every city in Washington County this month has declared it Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that's never happened before. So I have so much hope that this county can truly do what needs to be done in order to end violence inside of families. So thank you again so much for your support. Thank you for declaring this month Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And thank you for your continued attention to this issue to ensure that all of our community members can find the safety and hope that they need to thrive.
Thank you, Rachel. Very well said, and much better than what I could say in reading our proclamation. Yes, it's important. We're glad that all of our fellow cities in the county have also declared this as a Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Online, if you want to read the full text of our declaration, but let it be resolved that I, Keith Mays, Mayor of the City of Sherwood, do hereby proclaim that the month of October 2021 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much. Have a great night, you guys.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
The third and last presentation for this evening is Washington County update on the MISTIP process. Julia.
Yes, and I'm really just here to introduce our guests from Washington County. MISTIP is the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program, and county staff, Aaron Wardell, Chris Steffenbach, and Stephen Roberts are here to basically give you a brief overview of what the program is and does, and give you a little bit of information about the next process. And I might be stealing their thunder, and I'm sorry if I am, but the MISTIP process, the MISTIP program is what funded the Kruger-Elwart realignment, and it's funding the Tualatin Sherwood Road widening project, just to name a few things in Sherwood that have benefited or are in the process of being benefited from this program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Aaron is going to be doing the presenting, but I'm not 100% certain.
Actually, we have speaking roles for all three of us, so I'm going to let Stephen kick it off.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Council, for having us here tonight. Like Julia said, we wanted to just come and give you a briefing on the process that we're undertaking, and this is really allocating funding for the upcoming round of MSTIP projects. And so we anticipate this is funding received in fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 28. And so the projects are still a little ways off, but we have about a 1-year process ahead of us just to go through determining what are the projects and programs that we want to allocate that funding toward. And this is, I have to say, I think MSTIP really has been a transformational program for the county, just in terms of our ability to help keep up with the rapid growth that we've seen over the last 35 years. And Aaron will walk us through a little bit of the history of the program, just for those who haven't been around or aren't familiar with the long history of the program. But again, I think it just has really set us on a really strong footing here in Washington County. One of the keys to the success is really the collaborative nature of the process and the program. We do work very closely with all of our city partners and community members, and so we want to continue that success and keep building the program and look forward to doing more good things. So I think with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Chris, I think, who's going to walk us through the first few slides.
Thank you. We are very pleased to be here. This is the last of a series of city council meetings. I think we have one more that's being scheduled, but we've really appreciated all the comments, questions, and input we've had from each of these meetings. So I'm just going to start again that we're pleased to share our history, some of the history about Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program. Though it's been around from 1986, we know that there's a lot of new residents in Washington County and people who are not familiar with the program. So we want to start there. Then we want to share the funding allocation work plan and what that means. This work plan was recommended by the WCCC with comments that they made that were included in the work plan and then was approved by our board previously in September. So again, we want to share with you about the work plan and seek your input on what you'd like to see come out of the, your priorities for funding, that outcomes that are important to you, and talk about eligibility and engagement, the eligibility criteria for projects, and really engagement ideas as well. So first of all, as you know, transportation projects they have a long time span between starting with the planning process where you identify your priorities for your transportation system plan. Where this step that the MSTIP allocation process fits in is in this big red and blue box here, where we allocate funding that we expect to be generated in the years 2023 to 2028. And it's really all about keeping that pipeline going so that we have projects to continue to move forward into the next stages of project design and then construction. There is public input all along the way. You know well the public input that goes into identifying the transportation needs and projects in your community. And there will also be public input, which Aaron will talk about as part of the MSTIP process. So just a little bit of the overview. It has always been a focus on major streets for improving the transportation. And it is funded with countywide property taxes. And our board has committed the funding for this, and they're very excited to do so, recognizing what a significant contribution this is. It's been designed as a pay-as-you-go approach. And since it was first started in 1986, there have been more than 150 projects funded with more than 900 million, and that is now not all in today's dollars. So we know that it has made significant investments. The funding has been allocated, sort of keeping this pipeline going in 5-year cycles. And since the beginning, the project list for funding is recommended by the Washington County Coordinating Committee and approved by the Board of Commissioners. So throughout this is a very strong partnership with the cities in the development of the program and in the priorities. A little bit more about the history. I mentioned 1986. The MISTIP program started as a serial levy. There were 3 serial levies. And then in 1997, the levy rate was folded into the county's property tax rate. And since then, the commissioners have approved project funding, and we've completed 4 more cycles of funding, and this will be the 5th cycle. Next slide. So just to give you a little perspective, at the last cycle, which we called 3 E's, we're counting cycles alphabetically, there was total funding that was allocated was 175 million, which, approximately 35 million a year that we estimated for revenue of from the countywide, from the property taxes dedicated. And that funded in the last cycle, it funded 23 multimodal road projects and funding that was set aside for Opportunity Fund. And I think you're familiar with this. This has been highly successful, as it is funding set aside for a match for local jurisdictions and the county to use for competitive grant funding, and is leveraged about, for every $1 in the Opportunity Fund, it has leveraged about $5 to $6 in revenue. There's also been, since I think just about the beginning, a set aside for rural bridge projects, and then funding that's used as match for other intelligent transportation system improvements, because, as you know, our folks manage a lot of the traffic signals countywide. And then this shows the active and completed major street projects. And you'll see that the scope really has been across the county. And you can see the role that MISTIP has played in really developing an arterial network across the county. The blue areas here, blue and gray, show areas where the above average concentrations of people of color, limited English proficiency, and low income. What this map doesn't show is where a lot of low wage jobs are, which we know extend beyond these blue areas. But it just shows the role that the improvements have made for serving some of our equity areas in the county. Next slide. So in the Sherwood area, as Julia said at the beginning, she listed a couple of projects that were recently funded in the Sherwood area with MISTIP funds. And you'll see here the roundabout, and also Tralton Sherwood Road, Roy Rogers Road, 124th, for example. And I know that has triggered some interest in development on the Sherwood side of that road. And I think you can also see in this graphic, one of the features of the MISTIP program is that it's funding additional connections that help distribute the traffic around the county. And I think that with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin, who's going to talk about the major milestones and the steps moving forward with this current work plan. And before I do, Councilor Rosner. Rosner, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Super close. Rosner, but thank you.
No, I know I was messing that up.
No worries on that.
I shouldn't look at it phonetically.
Could you go back to that last slide real quick? I had a quick question.
Yeah.
For Tralton Sherwood and Roy Rogers, those projects were, it says completed projects. So you're talking about when they were widened to 3 lanes back in, what was that, 92, 93? That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, yeah. And I think that is, you've hit on a challenge for what we have in illustrating. These doesn't mean that everything is done, but it means that there has been MISTIP money spent on them. But you're right, I do remember when those were first built as well, and it was a long time ago now. But clearly there's more work planned for those. But that's a great question. We've kind of struggled with that. Putting it on the map doesn't necessarily mean it's done.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was coming from, because I was trying to, because I know some of those projects are just now getting started in terms of getting the 5 lanes. So
yeah.
All
I
right.
think the map legend may need to be updated a little bit too. I'm realizing it should say completed or funded MSTIP road projects. And I think our GIS staff truncated it a little bit when they put the smaller version together. So that's on
Yeah.
us. A couple of these are still being built.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize the county paid for, or MSTIP funds paid for the roads on the north and south side of the high school as well.
Yeah, this is, we funded the roundabout project, and I think there's maybe a little bit of work that we need to do to clean the map up here.
Okay.
We didn't actually fund the roads north and south of the high school.
Yeah, I think the county did the project. The school
Okay.
district contracted or whatever with the county to incorporate that into their project. So yeah, that's probably maybe some GIS confusion there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
the money being spent with Kruger and the Haiti improvements and then going up Elward, it's sometimes difficult to tease out. I think it's an important takeaway that MSTIP money can leverage other projects though. And so sometimes when we're in the vicinity doing a MSTIP project, it's also leveraging some development that's happening as well. And so we could also do a little GIS cleanup on that, but it's a good story about how MSTIP can leverage some of these other investments.
Right.
Right, and I was just going to say too, I noticed that the Highway 99 crossing project where Twalt and Sherwood and Roy Rogers intersect at 99W doesn't appear to be marked here clearly, but that project's just under construction. So
Right. And if I'm jumping ahead on this question, just let me know and I'll be quiet. But are you going to be talking about kind of some of the long range planning that's going on, because MSTIP projects need a plan before they can even get on the slate? So is there going to be a little bit of discussion on that in this meeting, or is that a different meeting?
We will be talking about the eligibility criteria for funding, or the eligibility criteria that's been used previously in a couple of slides.
and that may be a good point to come back to that question, Councilor Rosner.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was the debut of the graphic here. So good points.
We always have more work to do. With that, I'm going to start talking about the work plan. I'm Erin Wardell, and the Principal Transportation Planner for Washington County. Feel free to jump in if you do have questions as I'm going along. I'm going to be going through these slides sort of quickly, but if you want to throw up your Zoom hand, I will go ahead and call on you, because I think it's important that when people have a question, we can go ahead and address it while the slide is still up on the screen. Otherwise, you can hold your questions at the end and we'll go back to the slides. That works too. So this slide,
Councilor Rosner, sorry, you still have your Zoom hand up. So just so that she can make sure she doesn't call on you over and over again, you might, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, you don't want me asking more questions.
ask away. We're ready for it. So this slide lays out the 4 major milestones that we have established for this project. We are back here at milestone number 1, summer and fall of 2021. We have confirmed our work plan with the Board of County Commissioners. We are doing meetings like this where we're talking to people about that work plan. We took a lot of input before we finalized it with the board. Our next step will be developing our equity framework and public engagement plan. So those will be the important first steps of our first milestone. We'll then move into our second project milestone in the winter, which is to do a round of community engagement around what the community would like to see the outcomes of the MSTIP program be. We'll also be working on identifying the eligibility criteria and evaluation metrics for the projects that are submitted. And then we will move into initiating the project solicitation, which is going to be the application process by which projects are submitted through the Washington County Coordinating Committee, so through city staff or county staff to the coordinating committee, and then recommended eventually to the Board of Commissioners. So once the projects have been submitted, we'll move into milestone 3, which is where we evaluate the projects. We'll be also identifying the programmatic elements that will be a part of the MSTIP program. Chris talked about the programmatic elements in a previous slide. That's our MSTIP Opportunity Fund, which can be used as a competitive grant match, as well as our funds for rural bridge repair and intelligent transportation systems. We'll be having a conversation about if those are the right programmatic elements and if the dollar amounts allocated to them are the right amounts. We will then be ready to release the prioritized project list and the programmatic elements out to the community for another round of public engagement and comment, which will then take us into milestone number 4. About a year from now, we'll take this whole package back to the Board of Commissioners, and they will adopt it. They'll adopt the project list, the programmatic elements, and any updates to the administrative procedures. Counselor, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Milestone 3 and the release of the prioritized list. I'm make sure I understood that. Is that prioritized by the coordinating committee?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So the projects will go through a technical evaluation by staff representatives from the jurisdictions, as well as some technical experts we bring in from like Clean Water Services and our Health and Human Services Department as well, to help us do the evaluation measures. The coordinating committee's Transportation Advisory Committee will then look at the prioritized project list and do a first round of prioritization, and then take it back to the county coordinating committee, who will make the recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So there's several layers of filtering that will happen on that.
And can I just add in that prioritized list, we just are expecting to get a lot more applications than we will have money for.
Mm-hmm.
So the intent is to get focus public comment on a shorter list, not everything that gets submitted.
And I think that's an important point. We don't know yet how many projects are going to be submitted. It may be that every project submitted is absolutely fantastic and it meets all the evaluation criteria really well. And so we take them all out for public comment and see what people have to say. We'll certainly run the whole list by the county coordinating committee and let them see everything that's been submitted. Part of the project solicitation process this time around is making that more transparent so that everyone can see the projects that were submitted and have the jurisdictions compare them to the evaluation criteria just a little bit more publicly than we had done previously. But we'll find out. We don't know yet.
So a question I have then is, and maybe if you could help educate the public and us on this, but I really view these projects in 3 phases. There's the work you have to do to even make it eligible to submit. There's this approval process that you're talking about here. And then there's actually doing the project if it gets approved. And for the smaller cities, especially the outlying cities, it's difficult. And a lot of times we don't have the funds to go out and get those projects ready for submittal because there's a lot of work that goes into that. And typically projects that I always say they're grant ready, projects that you've done a lot of the engineering work and the initial studies and they're ready to go. It takes time, effort, and dollars to get projects there. And could you talk a little bit about how the smaller cities, fight for that? Like in the case of Sherwood, we see a lot of cut through. We have a lot of traffic coming out of Yamhill County to the work centers over in Hillsborough. They're loading up, Roy Rogers and Elwert and all those roads, and that's just going to get worse with time. What's the process? Is there long range planning going, but on at the county level? I know we've had some meetings on this prior, but what's the long-term plans for how we're going to manage, relocate, move that traffic, manage that growth, and make sure that probably not in this round, but in future rounds, that those projects are geared up and ready to go.
I just went ahead and advanced to the eligibility criteria slide because I think that's really what you're wanting to dig into a little bit. So let me go through this and then we'll see if we can answer more questions about that. For the past cycles of MSTIP, the county coordinating committee and the board established this eligibility criteria. Projects had to meet multimodal need. They had to be located on roadways of countywide significance. I'll talk about that map on the next slide. They had to rank as a high local priority, which means they're adopted into your transportation system plan generally. And overall, the program had to be geographically and financially balanced. So not spent just in one part of the county, but spent across the county. So I think what you're getting at is how do we know these projects are ready? And for MSTIP criteria, the project is ready if it's adopted into a jurisdiction's transportation system plan and the jurisdiction says it's a high priority for us. We don't need 30% design, anything like that as a base eligibility criteria for MSTIP. Projects have been funded by MSTIP without any of that engineering work having been done.
So for an existing road, that's pretty easy, right? But what about, like one of the conversations we're having internally, and Stephen, I think we had a conversation with you about this, but at some point we'd like to realign Elwert south, right? To take the pressure out of the neighborhoods as that area develops. And so for roads that don't even exist yet, that's a little tougher path. Right?
If it's not adopted into your transportation system plan under previous criteria, it wouldn't be eligible for MISTIP funding.
So we would have to do the legwork to adopt that for the kids. So there's no planning process at the county level to look at that and look at those traffic problems. We have to do that at the local level.
The county's transportation system plan is consistent with the city's transportation system plans. Generally, when the cities make an update to their TSP, we then adopt it into our transportation system plan to be consistent with yours. And so there is a bit of that iterative transportation planning happening. But generally, yes, we're, as a part of this process, deferring to the cities, deferring to your plan documents and to what your local priorities are.
Yeah, and it's for me, and I'm sorry I'm harping on this, I'm just trying to understand, but it's a little chicken and the egg for me too, because we have a challenge here because of the cut through traffic, but it's a wider county problem, with people, workers trying to get to and from their homes and work in the work centers. So we can continue to talk about it offline, but I think that's finding that path, I think, is important.
Yeah, but Tim, it's important, and this too, and most folks do, but the challenge of moving chunks of population from one part of the county to another is a challenge everywhere throughout the county, and that's why it's important that the second bullet on the past MISTIP cycle project eligibility criteria was on roadways of countywide significance. So you're not improving some local road that's not doing anything of benefit for the entire county. You're doing what we identify basically as the county grid.
Yeah, and that's key to the definition, is making sure those key roads are on that map.
Yeah. And Aaron, maybe before you jump into this, I'll just add a little bit. I really appreciate your line of thinking here, Councilor Rosner. It's a good question, and we do a lot of collaborative planning work, Aaron and her team, with the cities as folks are looking at urban reserve expansion areas or urban growth boundary expansions. Updating transportation system plans typically happens on a fairly regular cycle. So there's a lot of behind the scenes coordination that's happening between the county and the cities. And again, when we get to a process like this, typically the criteria it's in some sort of a plan. And there's been at least a little bit of preliminary work and some ground truthing that's been done to sort of assess that the project is needed, supported, and feasible. And Aaron mentioned that a lot of the project engineering and design work actually can be funded through the MSTIP project. And we are planning to, I'll say, up our game a little bit, I think, with this round of MSTIP to do a better job of getting a consistent baseline level of information on every project submittal, so that City A's submittal has a consistent level of information and detail as City B's submittal. Our staff will work with the staff of the smaller cities if they don't have in-house expertise to try to help refine those proposals and develop cost estimates and that sort of thing. So we want to have a good, consistent baseline of information across the county, regardless of the size or the technical capacity of the jurisdiction.
Sure, and that's super awesome. And by the way, I don't want to imply we don't have excellent staff. We do. It's more time constraint. When you only have a certain number of staff, you can only do so much. So that's really where I was coming from, because Julie and her team do an awesome job. But if I heard you right, can we apply for study money then through the MISTIP process?
Well, we have funded, not studies, but we have funded design work for projects. So in fact, we have 2 projects that were in the unincorporated area that were funded for 30% design as a part of the MISTIP 3E cycle. And we've done that intentionally in that it helps create that pipeline. So you have projects that have gone through that. We acknowledge the project needs to be built. It's a local priority, but we suspect it's pretty expensive and we don't know yet what we're getting into. So we need to fund the design work first before we take that next step and maybe fund it in the next cycle or seek some kind of grant, federal or state or something like that to pay for it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate the clarity on that.
Yeah, this is actually really helpful, and it's exactly the kind of dialogue we're looking for. So feel free to keep jumping in. This next slide shows that system of countywide interest map that we were talking about. You can see on here, the map was created in 2007 for a previous MSTIP funding allocation cycle. It was intended to show every arterial in the county and then collector roadways that were determined to serve more of a regional function. So this map has been updated a couple of times since then. We're going through an update process now. We've asked our city partners to go ahead and take a look at it, and please let us know if there's additional roads that we should be adding based on some planning work they've done, or a new understanding of an area or the function of a roadway. So we're collecting proposed changes to this now. We'll be sharing what we've heard so far with the WCCC at their meeting, their upcoming meeting. And then in November, we'll be asking them to make a recommendation to the board on an updated map. We've collected a handful of revisions from a couple of jurisdictions. I don't know if we've heard of any from Sherwood yet.
You
but
will,
you can see.
but yes, you will.
You will. We shall await then what we hear from Sherwood on that. But you can see on here, there are roadways identified in the Sherwood area. Your arterials and a few of your collectors have been identified already, and we'll be taking input from city staff at the TAC.
I have one more quick question on that. A lot of those little blue roads around Sherwood end in Clackamas County, and then it's a big white blank area. Is there, and I know that's been kind of a rocky history in terms of coordinating between the counties and what those roads look like. Is there any conversations going on with Clackamas County on, like, for instance, how would Brookman eventually get over to like Basalt Creek and some of those and I know that's 10, 20 years out. I'm just curious what's going on in that arena.
It hasn't been my experience that we've had a rocky relationship with Clackamas County on that. We do talk to them about some of the long range planning that we've done. We did the county's urban reserves transportation study, and we had long range planning conversations with Clackamas County staff. I will say it just doesn't seem to be their highest priority, right? It's a rural area for them. It's pretty far away from their population centers. It's just not where they're putting a lot of their attention, but they've been willing to talk to us and hear from us. So I think it's probably something we need to do a bit more of as we think about these long range plans. But it does kind of look like the edge of the world there when you look at the map.
Well, and it's, when Brookman's slated for 5 lanes to nowhere, does that make sense? Right. Maybe that's a change. But Keith, I think you were going to make a comment there.
Yeah, I mean, I lived this, and Steve, I believe, was around to Christina, maybe even at the metro level, but there's lots of great processes and steps and blah, blah, blah in Oregon with what we do with land use. And a very important one that impacts Sherwood in that area specifically is this whole urban reserve, rural preserve thing. And so all the land in the metro area of the counties was designated one or the other or undefined. And then reserves, the urban reserves is where Sherwood is, we've had conversations of growing, obviously, the Brookman Road, Sherwood West. This little knob of Clackamas County is undefined, I believe, right now. And that was a big squabble, because until it's in a reserve, an urban reserve, you can't build a new road in it under current state law. So until its designation changes or the state law changes, and you actually changing the designation is changing the state law as well. Yeah, we build roads to nowhere. If in the case of Brookman, and in the case of other roads that currently enter Clackamas County, it then becomes their responsibility. Because Steve, you might have already said, but within all of Oregon or just the metro region, what's the equivalent of the MSTIP in other parts of the region?
Well, there really isn't. So That's a part of the uniqueness of the program.
Yep, so we have a very special situation, which we've created a revenue stream. The voters, we've done it ourselves upon us to make improvements, and our neighbors have elected not to do that, either our Yamhill County neighbors or our Clackamas County neighbors. And so you see less improvement, less opportunity to help solve some of these issues.
Right. And I think maybe to Councilor Rosner's questions, I know there was a lot of acrimony around the planning efforts for the I-599 connector, which was sort of the genesis of the future alignment that sort of sweeps down into Clackamas County briefly and then back into Washington County. And I think what Aaron was alluding to is certainly at the staff level, we have excellent working relationships with our partners in Clackamas County, and we touch base pretty regularly with them and coordinate on a lot of work. And I know we've had some conversations around that area specifically, and I think certainly at the staff level, everybody understands the need and the desire there. There are some requirements that are part of the regional transportation plan, I think that put some limits on our ability to plan for this sort of, I'll say, western extension of the future Basalt Creek Parkway in this area until some other tasks are taken care of, like an I-5 corridor study and a few other little minor details. But there is definitely work to be done there, and those challenges exist and persist, but I have confidence that we'll eventually figure out how to work through all of that. But as the mayor says, that may be a longer term proposition.
Well, sure. And I hope I didn't think I was implying we need to get that cut through done today. It was more a question, I think, in my mind of if we know that's decades out, with current land use law at state level, do we really need to have that designated as 5 lanes? It's more of those types of questions, right? Are we planning for something that's not going to happen?
Well, you don't restrict your future, so you have that future opportunity. Part of the challenge that occurred before our time was things that happened in Tualatin that prevented opportunities from occurring, i.e., Highway 205 from continuing into Washington County. The opportunity got blown up.
Yep.
That's just one example.
Yep.
So maybe we can't build something now, but don't prevent us from building it in the future or something similar.
And it is something that we continue to talk to our partners about. As I mentioned, the county did the Urban Reserves Transportation Study to get an idea of what our long-term needs are as some of the reserve areas come online and are gradually brought into the urban growth boundary. You actually can build a road in undesignated under Oregon statewide planning rules. You cannot do it in rural reserve areas. So you are allowed to take an exception to statewide planning rules in either an urban reserve or undesignated to draw a line in your transportation system plan. It is a process that requires, going through findings and showing the need for it and meeting a number of criteria. But it is possible to do. It's just that notched area is in Clackamas County. So we would need Clackamas County to take the lead on taking the exception, drawing the line, and then somebody has to identify construction funding. So certainly a lot of hurdles to get through to make that connection.
And we're focused on the long term here, but in the shorter term, because of the configuration of that little land just to the I guess west of that little knockout, we have a lot of development going on there, and because of the railroad tracks, we can't provide access into Sherwood from that side. So we have this little tiny rural country road that is going to get loaded up with a lot of traffic. So we do have some concerns about the future of that road here in the short term.
Yep.
And just as a reminder, Brookman, for kind of all the reasons that we've been discussing here, the plan is that we're requiring the right of way for 5 lanes, but we're not actually requiring them to construct 5 lanes so that we don't have this 5 lane wide road that dead ends at a field for the next 30, 40 years. So
exactly. But it's quickly going to become another tile flat road. So I think that's where we're headed there.
So I wanted to move on to our next slide where we're talking about the proposed outcomes we'd like to see from the MISTIP program. These draft outcomes come from the county's transportation system plan for our first phase of public engagement and communications. We'd like to start with these as outcomes and then find out from the community if these are resonating or if there's additional outcomes we should be considering. These outcomes will then inform the evaluation criteria that we use when we go through the project solicitation and project evaluation process. So the 4 outcomes that are coming straight from the county's TSP are safety, economic vitality, livability, and natural environment. And then we've added equity as an overarching outcome for the program. So this again will be the focus of our first phase of public engagement. And with that, a little bit more about our community engagement approach. We are hiring a consultant as a staff extension because this is going to be quite a bit of work that we can use some expertise on. And so we're in negotiations with a consulting firm to do this work for us. It's Espousal Strategies, LLC, and they'll be using a number of sub-consultants, including Central Cultural and some other CBOs to help us work with the community. We'll have these 2 phases of engagement. The first is tell us what's important to you in the transportation system. That's that outcomes focused conversation in the fall. And then in the spring, we will ask people to tell us what projects they like best when they can see that prioritized project list. We'll be doing this targeted engagement with historically excluded communities. It's really important to us to be able to work through established committees and organizations. We want to be able to work with dedicated city equity and engagement staff, knowing that you know your own community best, and we'd like to be able to work directly with your staff, not step on any toes, not reinvent the wheel. And so we're working with our city partners in order to identify who those people are we should be talking to and what meetings we should be going to and how to best distribute information. So those conversations will be ongoing. And with that, we're on the question slide. I've already heard some questions. We're ready for more. So what are your priorities for this future funding allocation? What are your thoughts on our proposed approach and outcomes? Do you have any feedback on our proposed engagement plan? Do you have any questions about the process? And then is there anyone else you recommend we check in with as we go forward?
And I've talked a lot about this, so I want to give other folks in the council to talk about this. I mean, in the WCCC meetings.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I think Aaron may have alluded to it, but we've shared this information with the Washington County Coordinating Committee as a body, and they've recommended approval of the work plan to the board. And then we also met individually with many of the WCCC members and their alternates. And so we had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Mays and Councilor Rosner to preview some of this information a month or so ago, maybe longer.
And certainly what resonates with the people that are on the WCCC committee, which are mostly mayors or council presidents, is certainly keeping the balance of dividing up the dollars amongst the 4 county commission districts so that there's benefit throughout the county. And then certainly getting a lot of input from boots on the ground, individual cities, and helping to understand. Because the really nice thing about this program is how well we work within, at least we work well within County Commissioner Roy Rogers' area, and sometimes taking turns or realizing, that this project, has been on the books to do for a long time, and nothing has happened over in this part of the area for a while, so that we in turn get very balanced within Roy's district. As most of you know, things don't happen right away. You'll get something approved, but it might be 3, 5, 10 years before it gets built for a variety of reasons.
That's a good point. I think we spoke in our briefing about the Highway 99 crossing project at Twalt and Sherwood, and Roy Rogers was initially funded, I believe, in 2000, 2007 was when we initially identified the funding for that project. And for a whole variety of reasons, we're just starting construction finally. So,
yeah. So we're doing the idea of doing multimodal projects is a big piece of this. So it's not just roads, but it could also be bikes and sidewalks and pedestrian benefits and mass transit benefits. Something that we're putting, it's a project, is it on our TSP, or I have to double check, but anyways, it's a pedestrian crossing of a state highway. So we'll be asking, is that an eligible project? 99 is on the list, but the idea of adding a pedestrian crossing, not our bridge that we're now doing the engineering work on, but another crossing that is actually under 99. That
Is
is
this
a
the
priority.
trail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I would.
And that is in our TSP and in our, yeah, it's in our TSP, but yeah, it's not, that's an interesting question because it's not along a county collector or arterial. So, but it's across the state highway. So.
And the state highway is on the county list of roads of significance.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I guess my initial gut reaction would be to say, I think that's a project that's probably quite competitive for something like the Opportunity Fund, where that provides a source for local funding to go after a state or a federal grant to construct a project like that. And that's been extremely successful with trail projects throughout the county. And the county and a number of our other partner agencies have all benefited from that. And again, that's a great way to use a little bit of local money to bring in a significant amount of other funds into the county.
Yep.
And I do think we have heard a lot of support for not just maintaining, but also increasing the amount of the Opportunity Fund allocation, because it has been quite successful. And we, depending on a pending grant application, we may have all of that funding allocated through 2023. And so, it's been a very successful program, and the return rate on that has been very good. So we want to continue doing that, and probably will end up upping that allocation.
And it's my hope that we also disperse that Opportunity Fund equally amongst the 4 commission districts, so that it's not all gobbled up by one.
That's we try. The tough part about that is that it's kind of out of our control, because we're never sure who's going to get the grants awarded. And we put everything through that comes in, but we don't know.
That's right. There's a way we did it before, but we should there's nothing wrong with saying, how could we do that different?
I see.
So that, okay, now pick Roy Rogers district has now consumed 28% of the Opportunity Fund because they were successful. Great, they're done.
That's interesting. That's I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think what the mayor is getting at is there are certain jurisdictions that have been very successful and got multiple grants with multiple opportunity funds, which is great for them, but then it depletes the pot, so that the city of Sherwood has gotten authorization for several opportunity funds, but we haven't gotten the grant. And now if we do get successful with a grant at any point between now and the next cycle, we're out of luck. So just something to kind of think about in that.
Either that or, just give us the funds.
So Julie, are you saying that we got authorization to go after the grants, but by the time we get them, the money's already been spent out of the Opportunity Fund? Is that?
No, the Opportunity Fund, basically, when we get authorization, it's the county is saying we will be your match. And so when we submit for grants, we say we have a $1 million grant or a $50,000 grant or whatever it is. We've applied for a few grants, but we haven't been successful. So we've had the commitment that if we were successful, we would have that match from the Opportunity Fund. But the problem is there are some jurisdictions in the county that, sorry, my dog, my my husband's just getting home. There's some jurisdictions in the county that have gotten lots and lots, which is, again, is great for them, but it depletes the pot. And so at the end, there isn't necessarily money for jurisdictions that haven't been as successful, but might have otherwise been.
I don't think that we've run out of opportunity fund in previous cycles. I think it's more just a factor of who's
Only
been
had one
successful.
cycle of it.
No, opportunity fund.
Third.
This is the third opportunity fund cycle.
Yeah, well, we keep failing in our.
It's more a function of were you successful in the grant, because we would have provided that match if the grant applications were successful. What Stephen's alluding to in this cycle's funding, we are providing the local match for the Council Creek Regional Trail, which would go from Hillsborough to Cornelius to Forest Grove. And it's a very large federal grant, so it has a very large match. We may not be successful. So if we're not, then we'll have that money available for whatever other grant applications may come through. And we should know in about a month if that grant application is successful. We have kicked around the idea of maybe asking the board for a bridge or something like that if it's going to be a while before the next cycle can be approved, just because we know how popular this program is and we want to be able to support those trails and grants projects. But we'll find out more about that as we go forward.
But it doesn't diminish my request of still saying opportunity grants should be dispersed amongst the districts, just like the rest of the dollars. So we might not be successful, but we hope our friends in Tualatin or Tigard or King City or Durham are successful. If we're maybe a little slower in applying, then we're just a little slower in applying. Awesome. What else? Well, that was a great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Good discussion.
It is a good discussion, and we're
Raise
happy to
new
come back
points.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure
we're happy
we'll
to come
be-
back again as we go through the process if you have further questions for us, and really looking forward to working through the next milestones.
Yeah, and we'll know. We'll know more in the next month or two or three if there's more resources at the federal level for us to all chase.
Yeah, we heard last night at the Region 1 Act meeting to sharpen our pencils with $100 billion potentially for grant funding. Actually, the ODOT federal rep guys said, sharpen your pencils and get ready to apply for grants. So
100,
don't
how many?
know.
100 what?
he said 100 billion of the B. I think that must have been countrywide, not for us. But anyway, yes, I do. The point is, I think there will be more. They say if a bill passes, there'll be more grant opportunities, which are good and bad. It's hard to apply for grants.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Steve and Aaron and Christina. It was very good. I greatly appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
your time.
So next on our agenda, we have a public hearing. Sylvia, would you like to read and everything that's associated with our public hearing?
Absolutely. The Sherwood City Council will hold a public hearing this evening to receive testimony on ordinance 2021-009, adding a new chapter 5.34 to the Sherwood Municipal Code regarding non-residential leases. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present the staff report. Questions, if any, by the City Council for staff. We will then consider written testimony. Mayor and council, at this time, I have not received any. We will then close the public hearing. Final comments by staff, questions of staff, if any, by the council, followed by council discussion. This is the first hearing before the City Council on this ordinance. Generally, the council will hold 2 hearings prior to making a decision. A second hearing on this item is currently scheduled for the next council meeting, which is October the 19th. In accordance with the Sherwood City Charter, council reserves the right to make a decision at the close of this hearing by a unanimous vote of all city and council members.
Thank you, Sylvia. Josh and Cecilia.
Cecilia, I'll go ahead and let you take the lead on this, and I'll fill in as necessary.
All right, thanks, Josh. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having me. So the purpose of this, as Sylvia said, is to propose adding a new chapter to the Sherwood Municipal Code, Chapter 5.34. We're aiming to increase tenant awareness of use restrictions for non-residential leased properties through requiring a disclosure form and encouraging communication with the city. The reason for this is that we've had some instances where tenants haven't been aware of their restrictions on leased properties, and either their use hasn't been allowed or there have been significant fees associated with changing the purpose of the property. So the code itself has 3 sections. The first section is a general section. It aligns with other chapters of the code in terms of its format, and the key provisions, the purpose, which is to improve tenant awareness, and the effective date, which would be December 1st, 2021, so the end of this year. And this time frame gives staff time to contact landlords and to notify the public of these changes. The second section is disclosure requirements. So landlords would be required to disclose a form to tenants, which they could get from the city website or from the city hall. This would be required to be signed by both the tenant and the landlord prior to leasing. The form would indicate potential use restrictions and the impact of these on the tenant. It would also encourage the tenant to contact the city about these potential use restrictions, inform them of their rights and responsibilities, and like I said, it would be required to be signed by both parties. The third section is on enforcement. So there are a few options for the tenant. The first option would be to void the lease completely if this form wasn't signed. And the second option would be to recover costs from the landlord bringing the property into compliance up to a maximum of $20,000. The city is in no way liable, and so it's on the tenant to bring this a cause of action. So finally, we recommend to the City Council that we hold this first hearing on this new chapter through this ordinance, and that there will be a second hearing on October 19th, 2021. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. So we received no public testimony today, so we will close the public hearing portion of this first reading. City Council, questions for Cecilia or Josh on the proposed ordinance?
I have a question.
Yeah, Russell.
I have a couple. So on the form, it states that it's that paragraph 2 above the second green line, third green line, that talks about, if the landlord fails to inform the tenant, then they can get out of the lease and they can recover damages, expenses, whatever. So how confident are we that we are going to be able to contact every landlord? Are we going to come up with a landlord that says, I never got this notification? What's our process for making sure that we reach all the landlords? Because otherwise, it's not really fair to them. And second, that when you're listing the pot where the tenant has to sign their initials on the right-hand side, the fourth one down are the SDC charges. And that last sentence, in previous cases, these have been as high as $100,000. Okay, if that's a fact, awesome. But is that a little too scary? I mean, what's the average? Is the average, like, on average, these have been $20,000 on? I think if we only list the high, that, I don't know, it seems like a kind of scare tactic, but I just feel like maybe, can we reword that so it's a little less dramatic? Anyway, so I have those 2 questions.
Sure, so I can probably take the second question. The reason we chose the high was because we want to encourage tenants to contact the city, and we want to ensure that the landlords are providing the form. Because if we just show the low, I don't know what the lows were, but if we show the lower levels, it's not going to encourage as much the tenants and the landlords to sign this form. I might let Josh take the first question.
I mean, well, okay, I want to go back. What's the average? I mean, what would the average look like on that sentence as opposed to the high? I mean, is the average 55,
I actually can
or-
answer that. I would say the average is probably 0. I mean, that's not, they can't have an average of 0 when you have a high and a low, but most of them are nothing or minimal. But the problems and where we have the hardest issues is when it is significant. And Cecilia is absolutely right that the idea of having, we wanted them to understand that this isn't just something that you should initial and ignore, that it could be quite substantial. And actually, Josh, if you're okay, I can take the first question too, and you can add on to it as far as the notifying the landlords. I think our plan is that we would start with property owner, who the owner of the property is, and get that information out, work with the building department to identify landlords of non-residential sites. And frankly, we're not that big of a community that we don't, that I think that we can do that and make sure that we've done a really good job of getting everybody. That doesn't mean that people aren't still going to say they didn't get it, but we can do the best we can. Josh, do you want to add?
The only other thing that I think that we had talked about at one point, Julia, that was a great answer, is just to reach out to some of the landlord organizations in the region so they can inform their members as well.
And the chamber.
Yes, that was one that we talked about.
I mean, so are we attempting, I mean, I don't even know how this is going to be handled. Are we attempting to compile based on maybe property site, because that's finite, and then check them off or color code a map when we've contacted, and so we do a thorough job? I just feel like I don't want to leave anybody out. This is groundbreaking stuff. Josh says no one else does this. I like the idea. I just want to make sure if we're going to do this, that, we do it carefully. So.
Yeah, and Julia, feel free to chime in, but I think the idea would be that we would get addresses from those various sources and do probably a bulk mailing. So we're not having to check off, we spoke to this person, we spoke to this person, but just we get the biggest net of addresses we can from all those different sources and send out a mailing.
Well, then you're suggesting our net goal is not to reach everybody, but to reach everybody we can, which means there are going to be landlords that we do not contact, period, unless we're checking off the boxes. That was kind of my point.
So yeah, so Russell, I'm going to suggest that you table the question. Let staff chew on it a bit. Certainly, everyone gets a tax bill, property tax bill. Knowing that you get the addresses where property taxes go, for instance, is a pretty good list.
Well,
and so, Tim?
Andy,
so
go ahead, Tim.
Well, if I could jump in, I think so. I've been pushing for this particular ordinance for a while now, so I have a couple comments. First of all, we have a lot of great landlords that do great work, and if you're a business that's well established or a chain, all this stuff. That you have to check SDCs and go check with the city for allowed uses and find out what you're getting into. What the reason this became important to me is when you don't know that, you're a mom and pop, you're a startup, you're starting your own business, you're opening a pizza shop or a mercantile or a wine tasting bar or something like that. And a landlord, hypothetically, and it has happened, they know what the uses are. They know that their tenant is signing up for a use that's not allowed, but they let them sign a lease.
I could give you a list of instances
a long list. So we have some bad
in
actors
our community that this has happened.
And this is to protect those people that are, they're sinking their life savings into starting a new business, and they find out that they have to pay Clean Water Services $30,000 because they have to put a second bathroom in, or something like that. So this, I think most of our landlords are going to get it. They're going to understand it. It's going to be a nothing burger for them. This is really about protecting in those rare cases. I think Russell's point is important. We need to do everything we can to make sure that all the landlords and the commercial property operators are aware of this, because it's different. It's something that they're not used to. So we need to make sure that they're aware of it and it's well established. Then my last comment is there any way we could have a process where the landlord they have to identify what the permitted use is, so it's a little bit more prescriptive?
Yeah, so I think we talked about that. Part of the issue with that is that it's different. The uses are different for every property, so it's hard to prescribe because there are so many differences for each property. And so notifying tenants that there are these different uses for different properties and to contact the city regarding that particular property seemed to be the best option.
Yeah, and I agree. I think they have, because it's specific to the property. You're absolutely right. I'm just saying maybe the process is a little more prescriptive, where they have to take the form to the city and the city tells them what the use is, and then both sides.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yes. So the other part of that question then is that the city resources, we didn't want to bind the city's resources to require them and potentially open up the city to liability if they weren't involved in the process. So it's on it's on the tenant to bring the form to the city and discuss these uses, not on the city in any way.
Right, totally understand. I'm trying to figure out a forcing function just to make sure that happens. That's kind of where my brain's going. So definitely.
Yeah, and I think part of
I think at some point there has to be responsibility involved, right? I mean, and I speak as someone who opened a business in Sherwood, and this happened to me personally. So I speak from experience. But there was no bad intent or bad action on the part of the landlord at all. But there was discovery after I signed a lease of things that I didn't know about ahead of time. But I think if I'm a prospective tenant and the landlord gives me this document and says, you really, really, really should go check with the city, and I decide not to, that's on me. I mean, I'm opening a business. I got to do my homework. That's how I feel about that one.
I don't disagree with you, Doug. I think I've also, having signed a mortgage, you get a pile of paper put in front of you and they're like, sign here, initial here, sign here, sign here. I just want to make sure that this is potential real impacts and it's paid attention to. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to go down the road of having the city have to get involved in every commercial lease that happens in Sherwood. I have no interest in that.
Keith, you're on mute.
That's a good point, Doug. For the potential problem, I mean, people sign a lease and they sign a renewal or sign an extension. Most part, not in, well, in most cases, if not here, at some point the city is involved with each new business that comes into town. Hey, they should be getting a business license. Not at all uncommon to be doing TIs.
I'll just say, going back to the example I gave of my personal experience, if I had been given this document when I was meeting with my landlord and getting the lease documents, I feel like I would have contacted the city and asked them. And now I did contact the city after I signed the lease and found stuff out. But that was only because I was on planning commission and I knew there was probably some things I should ask about.
Right.
But I feel like even if I wasn't and didn't know those things, if I had this document, I definitely would have. Now, whether I would have done it before or after I signed the lease, who's to say? I was pretty desperate. I needed a spot at that moment in time, but it would have, at least someone would have alerted me that like, hey, you might want to check this stuff out. And I feel like that's our responsibility here.
Is there a timing aspect to this? Maybe we can incorporate, because I'll go back to signing your mortgage, when you go to the broker's office, you get a pile of documents put in front of you that day, right? Versus disclosure ahead of time that these are some things you need to do before you get to that point where you're going to sign a lease. I'm just throwing that out there as.
Yeah, so one of the provisions talks about giving the tenant 2 days, 2 full business days from the time they either sign the lease and they have 2 full business days to contact the city, or they don't sign the lease and they have 2 full business days to contact the city.
Why 2 days?
2 full business days, till 5 p.m. on the 2nd business day.
Is that long enough? Should we give them 5 days? I
think that's a Josh question.
Well, I think the concern I have on 2 days is, okay, so let's say I meet with the landlord at 3 p.m. on Monday, and they give me this document, and I say, great. And I go walk into City Hall on Tuesday morning and say, hey, I have questions, or I call or even email, which is probably more what I would do. I feel, and no offense to anybody in city staff, but I feel, and I'm going back to my experience again, that I don't think all my questions were answered in 2 business days, not even close. Like there was a lot of, oh, we got to check into that, we'll get back to you, and I think everybody was doing their best job, but that's a quick turnaround to get the answers you would need from city staff to be able to decide whether to sign the lease or not, or whether to try to get out of the lease and that you already signed.
Could we change that to like 10 business days? I don't think that impacts the majority of people, and it just gives people time to understand what they're getting into.
Yeah, so I think the only consideration there would be that the landlord would be liable for those 10 days. Would be, that there's that 10-day period that they might have signed a lease and they might not be able to find someone else for that 10-day period. But I'll let Josh jump in.
That's exactly right, Cecilia. We can absolutely change the number. It's just a balancing question, kind of a policy question of, on the one hand, you want to give tenants enough time to get the information they need. On the other hand, for this period of time, you're kind of in a limbo position between the landlord and the tenant, where the landlord doesn't know for sure that the tenant's not going to back out of the lease. And so it can delay being able to move forward with the use on that property and the landlord's ability to get somebody else, a different tenant in, if this tenant is going to back out. So where that balancing point is, I think, is a question for council. Those are the competing considerations.
Yeah, I just think 2 days is too short. I think it needs at least 5.
I think 5. I think 5 would be appropriate.
5 seems about right to me. But again, I want to go back and understand, does staff feel like they can turn around these questions in that amount of time? Consistently, every week in, week out.
So I think that, so we generally have a 24-hour, we're going to respond to people, at least initially, general customer service rule. That said, you're right. Sometimes we need to look into things or we need to find things out. But I think 5 days should absolutely be enough to identify for a prospective tenant whether or not the use requires a conditional use permit, and have some preliminary conversations and explain to them that there's a TI process and that they might need to hire an architect. It might not be enough to get into the system development charge discussion, depending on how much they know and how prepared they are. If they haven't even hired an architect and have no idea that they've got to do a TI, we may not have that information for them at that point in time, but it could be enough to get like the major stuff identified.
I mean, and again, I'll just going back to my own experience, because it's right on point here, is the two things that I recall, are the change of the conditional use permit. Is a conditional use permit required? Yes or no? And right off the bat, if it is, that's $5,000 minimum. And then secondly, do you need a change of occupancy? Which and then that's what triggers all of these things that could lead to tens of thousands or even more dollars. And so I think if you can give someone a yes or no answer on both of those questions. Yes or no, you need a conditional use permit. Yes or no, you would have to do a change of occupancy for your desired use. And then if the answer is no to both, you're pretty safe. If the answer is yes to one or the other, then the costs of that could range from X to Y. And you may not be able to give them an estimate of the cost, because that's where all the studies come into play and questions have to be answered. And that part takes weeks or months. But at least you can prepare them with a ballpark range, and then they can go like, whoa, never mind.
Yep. That's, I think Dougie described that really well. If folks can know that if they're going into this and it's fairly safe and straightforward and there's no surprises, great, let's go. If the potential tenant can know that, oops, it checks this box and this box, and I'm not sure where this road is heading at the end of the day, I need to really evaluate this, then they make a business decision.
And most of our commercial landlords are really good actors. And I mean, when the person says, hey, I'm going to open a restaurant in this space and it's only been used for retail, they're going to go, well, have you looked into all this? Because they don't want to have a fight with them after they sign a lease that, because they're now stuck with $100,000 in SDCs and permits and stuff like that. So most of them we're really trying to create awareness where that's not happening.
Yeah, and I will say that I think there's a lot of smaller landlords of smaller buildings that are really, they don't know either, right? They're not bad actors. They literally, and I've talked to several of them, around town and searching for. There's ones I've talked to that the use that they're currently using their building for is absolutely not permitted, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
So it's not bad intention. It's just lack of understanding or knowledge. So it's so much about educating the landlord as it is about educating the tenant.
Yeah, I mean, I know one landlord in town that just doesn't care and is a bad actor. And
you signed a lease, you're paying it. Sorry.
Yep. It's just the way that person operates, and it's their choice. They've been successful and kumbaya. But I also know at least one business that's been in a property that owned by that person that regretted it mightily after the fact. So other questions or thoughts or comments on this with our first reading?
I have another one. Can I ask another one, Mayor?
Of course.
Hey, so Josh, because this is sort of new and groundbreaking, and as I read this, if whatever 5 days, on the fourth day, the tenant, gets some responses from the city, and it's going to be, more money than they anticipated, then according to this, they can void the lease without penalty or recover costs from the landlord. So, and is that because the property is within the city limits, and so this is our ordinance. So we get to enforce that, and it supersedes their right as a landowner or whatever they have written into their lease contract. This is ironclad. We're not going to get dragged into some land use court over this, right, Josh? I can't see your face. I'm just looking into the black void. So
right. So like we've talked about a couple of times, this is charting new territory. So nothing in the law is ironclad when you're charting new territory, but we've done a lot of research on this. Cecilia's particularly done a lot of research on this. And we believe that, first of all, that the city has the authority to create this cause of action. And secondly, that the language that we have in there that says that the city is not liable, that if there is ever any sort of challenge to the city's authority in connection with a tenant enforcing their rights under this, that the city is indemnified. We believe that the city is adequately protected.
Okay.
Yeah. Home rule is a great thing when we can use it.
Yeah.
I guess my question would be, if the tenant gets the answers back from the city and decides, oh, this is too much for me, I need to void this lease, that hopefully there's some documentation that they have informed the landlord, like written, like, hey, I need to void this lease. Like, you can't, the landlord could say, the tenant never told me they wanted to void the lease. What's the mechanism?
Yeah. So the void, we're saying that they can void the lease for up to 2 days, or I guess up to 5 days, without penalty, and they have to pay. So I guess if the tenant was in the lease for a while and realized later that they had these additional fees, they would have to pay the landlord up to that point for the use that they had, for the time that they had used the property. I don't think we have any information in here right now that says that they have to provide written notice to the landlord that they are voiding the lease. But that's certainly something that we could add in.
So I'm confused as to what you just said, because if they come back and they don't void, after 5 days, they don't void the lease, they move forward, yes. They move forward with the lease, then there's no way of getting out of the lease at that point.
Right. If they move forward with the lease but hadn't been provided the form, I meant to say. They move forward with the lease, but they hadn't been provided with the form. I missed the essential.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes
then they can void the lease, as long as they pay for the time that they'd used the property.
Oh gosh, then there's the whole, how does the landlord prove they provided the form?
Well, the form has got to be signed by both parties.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's right.
Well,
I saw the
and I was noticing in that paragraph, under the bold text, it says the tenant may rescind their acceptance of the lease for any reason without penalty. For any reason, it doesn't have to be because it was so expensive. They can go 5 days or 4 days and 6 hours, and at the very last couple of hours decide, yeah, we're not going to do it. I mean, for whatever reason. I'm sure this is an anomaly. It's not going to happen that often, but.
My question is, where's the proof that they've rescinded the lease? Like me, I would put it in writing, but somebody else might just call the landlord and say, yeah, I don't want to do this. There's no record of it. And the landlord, bad actors, say, I never got notified. This lease is valid. Like,
isn't that between the landlord and the tenant at that point? Like, we don't have an involvement of that.
Well, we make them sign this.
We would if.
Right, but okay, so they sign this, they turn it in, 4 days go by, the tenant decides they don't want to be in the lease anymore because they're going to require a bunch of money, and they inform their landlord that they're out. One of two things is either going to happen. The landlord's going to say, okay, sorry, it didn't work out, or the landlord's going to take them to court. We're not a party to that lawsuit.
Right.
It's between them. So the tenant will have to prove that they notify the landlord, or vice versa. I don't see why.
Aren't we the ones who have to enforce the ordinance, though, that the tenant is allowed to be out of the lease if it's within the 5 days?
So it's possible that we might provide a suggested form that the tenant could use to void the lease, fill in the information, have a place to be notarized. So
even something on the bottom of the existing form saying, I've done my due diligence, I accept the lease as is, or I want out of the lease.
Yeah, something like that. So so chew on that in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
thank you.
Awesome. And Cecilia, thank you so much for all your hard work on this and putting this together.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Breaking new legal ground.
Yes.
Oof.
Thank you for having me involved.
Fighting stuff. Tenant landlord.
10 years from now, when
And I have to
every
say,
city
we've had
has
some
this
really,
ordinance,
really
you can
good
brag
legal
about it.
interns the last few years, Josh. So well done.
Yeah.
And well done, Cecilia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cecilia, how much longer are you with us, by the way?
And we don't know the end date yet.
Approximately?
At least through the beginning of next year, I think.
Okay.
Depends on Josh a little bit with his family situation.
Fair enough.
Cecilia, when Congress passes this law nationwide in 10 years, you can brag about how you plowed the field and seeded the ground for this.
That's right.
Hey, does Cecilia get to sit in and be Josh Zoper pro tem for a few months?
Unfortunately,
That's not
actually,
allowed.
it's the opposite. She's not allowed to perform legal work unless under the supervision of an attorney.
So does she also have to go on paternity leave?
She's taking the same time off as I am, but it coincides with exams and the holidays, so it could be worse. Right.
All right.
No, it's good timing.
Awesome.
Well,
All right.
thank
So
you.
anything else to contribute to this topic, folks? Great. Awesome. Good job, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a good conversation, good presentation, very good presentation.
Yeah, very good.
Next on our agenda is city manager report. Kristen, and I'm just
Our final one.
and listen to you just jumping in. Exactly. So little kumbaya shout out, Kristen.
She's not going anywhere.
I know, but it seems like a day, but it's actually been more like 5 months.
Wow.
4 months, 5 months.
In a while.
Been a while as city manager pro tem, and kudos, you did a nice job. Very, very nice job.
Thank you. And again, thank you all for your support and for giving me this opportunity. It really has been fun and interesting, and I've learned a lot. So thank you. The only thing that I have tonight is I did want to mention that we still have several vacancies on board and commissions. So if you know anybody who is interested in getting involved and trying to find a way to either learn more about the city or how the city functions, we would love to have them apply. We have a few vacancies on the library board, I believe the planning commission, and also traffic safety committee. So just encourage people to check out the website, get more information, and we would love to fill those vacancies as soon as possible.
That's awesome. That's fewer than I thought we had, because we filled so many in the last couple of weeks. That's your only report for your last report?
That's it, unless you have questions for me.
All right, throw them out. Throw those questions out.
What was the hardest thing you had to handle as being city manager pro tem?
Besides the mayor.
Or council president Rosner.
Yeah, Rossner.
That's equal footing there.
I had to
plead the fifth. No. No. I honestly, nothing specific comes to mind. I mean, I think it's balancing. Look at Keith laughing there. No, I think it's just balancing the needs of the community and the different wants. It is hard. I mean, like our conversation and work session earlier, when you see both sides and you see that there's pros and cons to different situations, and just making sure that everybody's heard and everybody feels like they can be part of the solution, but then realizing that you're not going to please everybody, and not everybody is going to be happy with the decisions that you make. And I come from Parks and Rec and Community Services, where I like to create fun. And as I've said before, I've had to be the fun killer sometime in this role, and that's not fun to do. So
I joked that when Kristen started this job, everyone in the city liked her, and I told her, when you're done, that ain't going to be the case.
I don't think you're accurate.
I don't either. Yeah.
I think at least one person doesn't like you now.
Well, Keith,
at least one. At least one.
We're not talking about you right now.
Oh. Can't believe you just raised your hand.
I was raising it in your spirit for you. No, you've done a great job. And any other questions for Kristen or her team on her last meeting as team leader? Getting off so easy. All right. Moving on, council announcements. Anyone have stuff to say? Russell.
Okay, I'll go. Let's see. The Sherwood Robin Hood Festival is still planning the winter festival. Those plans are still, being made, and they're just trying to figure out how to have the best, funnest, coolest, not coldest, but great winter celebration. So that's still coming up. We can look forward to that. I was going to say something. What was it? Oh, maybe not right now, but I know the other night, sometime, I think it was sometime over the weekend, maybe it was Saturday night or Sunday night. It seems like there were about, another 200 police officers, and I'm exaggerating, at the corner of 12th and Sherwood Road and 99. There was a big event. Maybe it was a crash. Maybe it was an injury. I don't know what it was. But there were a lot of people asked me, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. Call the chief. Not really. I wouldn't give out the chief's number. But it'd be, if something happened, of a major deal, it'd be nice to get an update on that every once in a while. And I
Just
would like
tell them to look on the community page.
Right. Well, I didn't see anything right away, but maybe I looked too early. And I would also like to say to Kristen personally that I felt like I think you did a great job. And I texted her this a couple of times or email, and I just said sometimes when you're having a conversation with Kristen and the topic might be of a sensitive nature, she's the best. She dances around so delicately, so agilely. It's just awesome. And still, I never felt at any time that I was, my concern, my interest was not heard, not recognized, or pushed aside. So she has this great talent. Stay calm, stay cool. I mean, she may go out to the car and like scream. I don't know what she does.
She calls me.
Maybe that's what she does. But I think you did a great job. And I thought it might be kind of fun if before the other Keith gets here, the younger Keith, whatever we're going to call him, if you secretly took something from the city manager's office, don't tell anybody what it is, but take it and that'll be your little memento. Maybe you drill holes through it and wear it as like a neck chain or something. I don't know, but something. And then eventually maybe at Christmas time, give it back to the new Keith as a Christmas present. Yeah, that's what I think you should do. So that's it.
Thank you, Russell. Kim?
Yep, I don't have anything tonight except to thank Kristen for her 5 months. You were absolutely the perfect person to step in. And like Russell said, you are so calm. I mean, I don't know I've ever seen you stressed out. You just did everything so calmly, and you were very communicative. I mean, we got all the emails. I appreciate all the updates you gave us, and asking for our input when needed. And so I'm glad we're not actually saying goodbye to you, and that you are still around and can go back into your normal role, which might feel a little odd for a little while for you.
Thank you.
Doug?
Nothing much from me today as well. We didn't have planning commission last week, so it was kind of a nice Tuesday off for me, which I don't get too many. When we have the 5th Tuesday in a month, it's very exciting because I don't have a city meeting on that night. Which last month we didn't have 5 Tuesdays, but we didn't have planning commission last week, so it was like, hey, bonus Tuesday off. So no, other than that, thanks, Kristen. Really appreciate all your service, and you did a great job. And honestly, we just felt like the machine kept rolling, which I guess is probably one of the highest compliments you can give to you and the whole city staff. So well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Sean?
Yeah, not much to report here as well. I met with Kristen earlier today, expressed my thanks to her, but I'll also say it here as well. And very similar thoughts to that is that it was a very smooth time that she was here. Thankfully, there were no huge emergencies, but if there were, I know that she would have handled them. And Doug, you make a good point. Not only thanks to Kristen for all the work you did, but almost certainly there had to be some adaptation of roles behind Kristen with our city staff as well, filling in on on some of the things that just Kristen, just by simple human nature couldn't accomplish both jobs at the same time. So big thanks everybody. Things could have gone terribly, terribly wrong, and they didn't even come close to that. It was a very smooth time, and looking forward to working with our new city manager and keeping things moving in a positive way. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Sean. Tim?
Trying to think of all the stuff that's been going on. I just, for everybody, I had a Zoom meeting with Catherine Harrington at my request, and we talked a little bit about how the county partners with the cities at the elected and policy level. It was a good conversation. And just so everyone's aware, the county is working hard to make sure that renters know that there is renter assist funding available that came through I think some of it was from CARES and the follow-on act. The counties are the county and the state is having challenges processing all those claims because there's a 60-day deadline from when you apply to when you get the money, and they're not meeting that time frame. So they ask a lot of the cities in Washington County to put an ordinance in place to protect renters while they're going through that process. And I got to inform her that we already have that in place. We put, everyone remembers, we put a moratorium on it, residential and commercial evictions. I think that was in March or April of 2020. And because we have a 6-month catch-up period after the emergency order was lifted, we already have it in place and we're in good shape. So that was good news, but we do need to get the word out to our renters that program's available. And if they need it, they should take advantage of it. And then I just want to add my accolades. Kristen, I've really enjoyed working with you. I know we'll continue to work together. You've done a great job, and I agree with everything everyone has said as they've talked about what the great work you've been doing. I've really appreciated your candid, direct style. I always knew exactly what was going on, and you weren't afraid to tell me when you thought I was wrong or didn't have all the facts, which was great, and I appreciate that. And again, just awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just add really quick, I know the mayor still has stuff to say, but thank you for pointing out, absolutely, this was a team effort. So while everyone else is on the call, I just want to thank all of the other department heads for stepping up and filling in, and I really appreciate all of your extra time as well. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, they made you look good.
Yeah, they really did.
Yeah, kudos. Again, going to my age or something, as Russell was so kind to comment on. Kristen and I, we've been involved. I mean, she's worked for the city for almost as long as I've been a volunteer in the city, and we have never had as long and interesting conversations before, unlike the last 4 or 5 months, and I enjoyed it, and appreciate the work that you did working with your team of your departments that you're going back to, who all stepped up in their ways to carry extra work and stuff, and then working with all the rest of the city leadership during these times. And not easy days. Some days were rather crappy, and then other days were a lot of fun. And you see that roller coaster that is the job and life, and the challenges that you I think you would agree you got to see and be in the middle of stuff that you never had to really be in the middle of or see before. It's kind of cool. So appreciate all that. And 2 more days, or no, 36 hours, 30 hours. So you are all powerful for another short stretch of time. So what else do you want to get done before you turn over the reins? I'll leave you that thought.
Great. I've got a list over here.
All right. because everyone should know the city manager has more authority than any one of us do by leaps and bounds and bounds and bounds. So that's just the nature of the structure of what we do. So great job. With that, I have nothing to announce. I didn't have any meetings of note to report on, but spent some time. We're getting ready to do this abbreviated League of Oregon Cities thing in a couple of weeks that I'm sure everyone will be involved in chiming in on and watching. So we're going to adjourn in a second, the city council meeting, and we're going to reconvene our work session to discuss chickens.
Are we going back to the other Zoom link?
Yes. Brad, is the other Zoom link still available?
Brad, can we do that?
Should be.
Be able to. We'll give it a shot.
All right.
How's that for
Thank you,
confidence?
everyone. We're adjourned, and we're going to go back to reconvene.